visiting grief and anger families of the victims, as well as thousands of other Lebanese, marked that anniversary. There was a moment of silence. There were prayers at the foot of the silo, shredded by that blast. Several thousand people staged protests also at various locations in Beirut. A group of protesters threw stones at security forces near Parliament, which they accuse of blocking the investigation into the port blast. This by refusing to lift immunity of senior politicians implicated in negligence. For more on the day's events, we can cross now to Beirut and Sally Farhat, who's been following events for France 24. Sally, a day of strong emotions in Beirut one year on. Tell us what you've been seeing.
Indeed, it's a day of very strong emotions, including sadness clearly on the victims of the blast, but also anger and frustration at a government or leadership that has failed to form a government that could save Lebanon from deadlock. Earlier during the day, after protesters moved from the port area to the parliament or to the area surrounding the parliament, clashes started between protesters and the internal security forces, and these clashes ended up with the forces throwing back at protesters tear gas, and it ultimately led to the dispersion of protesters, and the protests just ended. Actually, you might be able to see behind me the remaining of what protesters, of the fire that protesters started. But aside from that, everyone has left the area after intense clashes between them and the internal security forces.
Sally, I've been seeing a lot of comments on social media with people saying that they feel the blast happened yesterday or last week, that the trauma is still extremely fresh and that nothing meaningful has changed. Is that the general impression that you're picking up on too? Or do people feel that there has been some movement in the past 12 months?
You actually got the exact emotion or the exact feeling of people. So people do not still feel like the August 4 just happened. They still live the trauma they went through, whether they're families of the victims or those who were injured or even those that weren't close to the port. But everyone still feels heartbroken over that devastating event, especially that no justice has been served so far. Although Judge Tariq Bitar has been trying to lift immunities on some politicians and question Major General Abbas Ibrahim. However, he has failed so far to do either, given that the parliament ignored or did not approve the motion to lift immunities on parliamentary members in order for Tariq Bitar to actually question them. They want to be questioned by a special body or a special council that is specific for politicians or parliamentary and parliamentary members. But this Supreme Council is clearly made of people that are appointed by politicians, which means it won't lead to anywhere. People do not believe in local justice here and thus are calling for an international investigation into the blast.
Just one final question, Sally. The Lebanese have often been described as an extremely resilient people, many challenges over the past decades, war and all sorts of different challenges. But is there more despair now in Lebanon with the current situation than there has been with past crises? I suppose it's a very broad question, but is there much hope in Lebanon now, 1 year on from that blast, and with all of the other problems right now, economic collapse, etc.?
So the word resilience itself, which has described the Lebanese over their history, basically, is now a controversial word, because the Lebanese do not want to be seen as resilient anymore. They want the right to live peacefully without having to be forced to be resilient. They feel like they've already been through much over history, and they do not want to be resilient anymore. They want justice. They want a government that would not make them want to be resilient. They want to just live peacefully, and this is why the word is being controversial these past few actually after the August 4 blast it became controversial. The Lebanese don't want to see themselves as resilient anymore. They want justice and they want to be treated as normal citizens in their own country. They want to feel like they belong to their country and not like they have to fight in order to feel like they belong in this country.
Okay, Sally Farhat, a tough day in Lebanon, in Beirut, remembering 1 year on a disastrous event, and indeed a country that no longer wants to feel like it has to be resilient. Thanks for that.